Hi guys, how are you? I'm James Payne, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm from Great Art Explained, my channel, and which probably most of you know. And today I'm here using Google Arts and Culture's Zoom feature, which I've used twice before, and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We can go really close in on the Impressionists, and it's a really cool app as well, and website. I use it a lot when I'm researching my videos, as some of you know, just because you can really get deep into the artist's work. And there's, I think there's like 2,000 cultural institutions they have. So today on the live stream, I'm going to be asking you questions. I've already asked you one question, which is, who is your favorite impressionist? So why don't you start typing away and giving us some answers, just to get a dialogue going, so it's not me jabbering on all the time. And so we're going to be using the Super Zoom tool today, and we're going to be talking about the Impressionists. As you know, if you followed my site, and if you go on my Instagram page, the Impressionists are actually incredibly revolutionary, incredibly different, and we think of them today as very, very pretty, very beautiful works. Everyone loves the Impressionists, but in fact in their day they were pretty much hated by most people. So what I'm going to be doing, we're going to be concentrating on roughly the end of the 1800s, and always in Paris. We're going to be staying in Paris for this whole trip, jumping back and forth to London for a bit of extra flavour. And it's a period when artists are starting to explore new modern subject matter, the kind of thing that when we look at a painting now we think, oh, there's Big Ben, there's these exciting monuments, that they wouldn't have put in their paintings. We take them for granted, but they were totally new in their day, going against classical subject matter, and looking forward to work that really reflected their lives. I want to start this by going back rather than forwards. We're going to look at the first painting, and if we could pull up the first painting. Does anyone know? I'll give you an easy one. Do you know who that is? And do you know who it's by? Who is the artist? Anyone want to hazard a guess? I think who it is pretty obvious, but I would say that who it's by is not so obvious, although he did paint him many times. Oh, Daniel Oliveros got it in one. So yes, it's Napoleon, and it is by David. So it's by David, Jacques Louis David. It's from 1812. I don't even know if Napoleon was in front of him when he painted this. I very much doubt it. It was probably done from drawings. But anyway, David was a French painter in the neoclassical style, hugely popular with the upper classes and considered to be the preeminent painter of his day. He was a kind of very famous painter. This portrait is a classic example of what French, actually what European art was like at the time. Everything is perfect. And the organisation behind this is the Académie des Beaux-Arts. They're the ones who dominated the French art scene, and they decided, as you know if you've seen my other talks, they decided that historical subjects were important, religious themes were important, and portraits were important. But as we learnt from our last talk, landscape and still life were not important as far as the Academy was concerned. They preferred realistic, carefully finished images. If we zoom in a little bit on this painting, doesn't have to be too much. Let's go down to his buttons and to his cufflinks. And if we look at his cufflinks, for example, or his buttons on the, you can see they're absolutely perfect. They're absolutely perfect. And they look pristine as well. There's not a brush stroke to be seen, as which is different from what we're going to see later. And paintings of this type were made up of very precise brush strokes, carefully blended to hide the artist's hand. So hide the artist's hand, and colour is very restrained. If we pull back now on the whole painting, you'll see the colours are very withdrawn, very quiet, and those colours were even toned down further by using a coat of varnish, a very heavy coat of varnish. In another talk I'll be talking about Edvard Munch, for example, who didn't use varnish. Not all artists chose to use the same methods. Now we're going to jump from this one to another one. We're going to jump to another painting here, very different. Anyone want to hazard a guess at who this painting is by? just take a rough guess. This painting looks very, very modern to me. It's not. It's by a British artist, if you want to take a guess who it is. It's from 1836. If you are British, by the way, that's a good guess, Monet. But it's a British artist. If you are British, it's very surprising for a Brit like me to think of this man as a revolutionary, a kind of a new painter. Okay, you got it. So Liesel got it. It's by John Constable. So if we could pull back here now. A lot of you are saying Turner because you probably know that Turner is incredibly influential, but this is actually another influential British artist. It's John Constable, and we think of him as a countryside artist who paints very, very bucolic scenes, but in fact he was very experimental, as you saw in that close-up of the sky. And you could see how loose and free his brushstrokes were. Now think about this, think about that, compare that to David, the painting of Napoleon. Very smooth, very clean brushstrokes, and yet this one is very, very loose and very experimental. And then along comes someone else in France. We're going to go back to France now to our next artist. And our next artist is, anyone want to take a guess who this is? It's quite hard to guess who this artist is from this particular painting. And the painting is The Death of Sardanapalus. It's from 1844, if you want to be precise. But if you want to take a guess, some of you are getting it, and I'm really amazed because I chose a really obscure one this time. But in fact, it says everything you want to say. Everyone's getting it, so you got it right. So this is, yes, if we pull back, it's by Delacroix. And I was going to say the clue is he's romantic. This is by Eugène Delacroix, who was the enfant terrible of the early 19th century French art, leading artist of the French Romantic period. Probably one of my favourite artists of all time. He was very dashing, very good looking. He was a bit like a rock star, a bit of a punk rocker, a bit like a young Mick Jagger. He first showed this particular painting in the Paris Salon. Now remember, this is really important for you to remember because it affects our story. The Paris Salon is run by the Academy. The only place, if you're a French painter, to show your paintings is in the Academy. And the Academy is going to be running the salon, so they decide everything. And this did go in the salon 1827 to be precise, and it caused an absolute scandal. Now if we go in close here, we'll see why it's caused a scandal. It's actually a depiction of rape and murder, but the rape and murder was kind of not scandalous for the French Academy. It was because of the loose brushstrokes. They didn't like his loose brushstrokes. Going close, if you go in back a little bit to the bottom of the bed, there's a bit of green there. This kind of sums Delacroix up. That's a scarf there. If you put in close to the scarf, nice and close as we can, and you'll see just beautiful brushstrokes there. A couple of strokes here and there, and he's created this incredibly complicated folded scarf. And the green and the red are opposite colours, and that's what Delacroix is about. He's about colour theory, and this is why the Impressionists followed him. Now if we could pull back to the whole painting again as a whole, you tell me, is there a centre to this painting? Do you think there's a centre to the painting? Is there a horizon to the painting? There's not really a centre. There isn't a horizon, and that's because that's what caused the scandal, because it was very chaotic. The composition was very chaotic. This is something new as well. We've had centuries and centuries of having perfect pictures, and now artists are starting to work differently. As we saw, he went in close. He's not interested in nice, tidy paintwork. Which obsessed David, by the way, or David. This was an area, look at the beautiful brushstrokes there. Delacroix's approach to painting broke away completely from the accepted norms of what art was. He's really an avant-garde artist. He's the major influence on the Impressionists. In particular, as I said, his use of colour. And that's going to influence Renoir, Monet, Pissarro, Gauguin in particular, and Cézanne. Cézanne loved Delacroix. Many of those artists just wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Cézanne and the way he changed art. Delacroix and the way he changed art. So they're trying to create an impression. That's what's really, really important here. I think we need to talk about context here, and let's talk about context. Let's go to the next image now. Okay, so this is a photograph, and photographs are very, very important. Does anyone know roughly when photography was invented? This is going to completely change how artists are working. They're very much interested in photography. In fact, a lot of artists, including Monet, used photography. But what happened was this is going to change the way people look at things. So photography was invented in the 1830s, created a problem for artists, because what it meant was reality could be captured very, very quickly, in seconds. Okay, minutes maybe at the start, and cheaply. Eventually it was cheaply. Yes, it was the 1830s was the photography. That's disputed, but roughly the 1830s. Why paint a mountain like this that looks exactly like a mountain when you can just take a photo? Artists had to look for a new way of thinking, and that's our next picture. So we're going to go from a photograph of a mountain to our next picture. And that is by Paul Cézanne, as you can see there. And before the 1840s, if the artist wanted to paint outside, they really struggled to do that. So this is the Mont Saint-Victoire, and what it meant was he could paint the image again and again. And does anyone want to take a rough idea? The Impressionists are all about repeating the same image again and again, but using different times of day. Does anyone want to take a guess? Let's say, for example, Monet painted haystacks 31 times. He painted Rouen Cathedral 30 odd times as well. Does anyone know how many times Cézanne painted Mont Saint-Victoire? Anyone want to take a guess at how many times he painted Mont Saint-Victoire? Just bear with me a second. 23, 20, some good guesses coming in. 200, that's a pretty extreme guess. You're not getting far off though, to be honest. So he actually painted this over 60 times. So he painted this 60 times. And before Cézanne happened, you would have had to paint outside with a pig's bladder filled with paint. So if artists wanted to go outside, they struggled to keep the oil paints from drying, and so the invention of the portable oil paints are very, very important. And it meant artists like Cézanne could work outside. Yep, 60 times. Was he using the same colours? Very good question. No, he wasn't. He did use very, very similar colours because he is experimental colours. If we go in close to this one, you can see the experimentation is pretty spectacular, and the loose brushstrokes. You can see that he and the other Impressionists didn't really use black. So you can see that isn't black, that's dark blue. And look at the way the stripe colours going, and you can see that eventually is going to turn into cubism. So the cubist artists are going to be affected by him. So before this, artists like Constable used to sketch in the open air until the portable oil paints were invented. And when we say we're painting outside, you say, in French they say en plein air, so outside. So that's what you're going to hear a lot when you're talking about Monet, for example. So next, if we're going to go to our next picture, please. And this next picture, does anyone know who this painting is by? He's not the most famous painter in the world, but he's very, very influential. Oh, there's a good question there. What was the reason for these repeats? So the reason for repeating the same image again was they were painting from different angles, and they were painting at different times of day as well. So what they're really, really looking for is the changes in the light and the changes in the atmosphere. So they're really trying to get the impression of that building rather than the building itself. So for example, Monet wasn't interested in Rouen Cathedral when he painted it again and again. He was more interested in the way the shadows hit and the light hit as well. So it was a whole new way of looking at things, and the repeating of the image was more like studies. So they were more like a study really, but they were selling them as paintings. So this artist here, anyone know? Yep, somebody's got it. So if we pull back now, so somebody got this correctly. This is Boudin, and as you can see there, this is the end of the 1800s, 1895, and Boudin was the Eugène Boudin. This one is called Boats in Deauville. So Boudin was born in Honfleur in France, in the north of France, and the light here is pretty spectacular. That's very, very important. Claude Monet is 15 years younger than him. He was teaching him. He's raised in Le Havre, which is the harbour town. And Boudin, the guy who painted this, look, if you go up close here, he was never really considered an Impressionist, but you can see where it came from. This is before the Impressionists. Boudin was Monet's teacher. He actually was in the first Impressionist exhibition. So he was one of the first painters to ever paint exclusively outside en plein air. And Claude Monet at the time, he was more like a sort of cartoonist. That's how you would consider Monet. He was more like a cartoonist, and Boudin was teaching him. And Boudin was teaching him, and he spotted his talent. He realized he was an incredible painter, and he encouraged Monet to come outside and paint with him en plein air. So Boudin was very, very influential, which is what I want to show you. I want to show you these artists who were influential to the Impressionists. Now we're going to go to our next picture. Anyone want to take a guess at what this is portraying? So what we've got here, I'm looking at the reasons behind the Impressionists. The first, and in my personal opinion, the most important, is the invention of the camera. That changes everything. The second one, very, very important technically, and that's the invention of the oil paint. It means you can go outside. And then the third one, what's really, really important for many of our art movements, is many of these art movements came out of war, as I've explained before. So war really changes people, as we know. If we pull back now, yeah, these are some really excellent guesses. So this is actually from the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 71. And as you can see, this is painted at the time in situ as well. It was a particularly nasty war which took place right on the streets of Paris. This is in Paris. And out of this violence emerged artists who were just fed up with the status quo. They'd seen their friends and family killed in front of them. So did they want to paint pretty pictures once they'd seen all this violence and anger around them? No, they didn't. So many French artists fought and died in the war. Cézanne, he escaped. Does anyone know where Cézanne went off to? Look at the lovely economy of line there on that as well. So again, you're not seeing black lines. Remember, there are no black lines in nature. This is what the Impressionists were all about. Anyone know where Cézanne went off to? He went where there was plenty of bright, vibrant colours and light. It changed his whole palette. So imagine if you were living in, say, a dark, dingy country and you were painting, and then you move to somewhere like the south of France. It's going to change the way you look at something. So he actually went to L'Estaque, where he went to Aix-en-Provence, is where Cézanne's going to end up. And that's going to really change him, and he's going to kind of move away from the Impressionists as well. Monet, where did he go? He was too old to serve. He went to London. Let's go to our next picture, please. Anyone know who this painting is by? I think a lot of you are going to get this. It's not so obvious. I tried to pick a picture which wasn't so obvious, but I think most of you are going to guess who this is. It's an artist who, for sure, he lays the groundwork for the Impressionists. So Turner was an artist. Oh, sorry, it's Turner. Yep, got it right. Yep. So Turner, JMW Turner, he got it. He was an artist way ahead of his time, and Monet studied him when he was in London, away from the Franco-Prussian War. Remember, the Franco-Prussian War was only 1 year but it was very, very aggressive. And very aggressive, very, very violent, over with real quickly. Monet's in London, he's studying Turner. Now folks, I'm British, but I'm not going to pretend that Impressionism was down to the British influence. That would be very presumptuous of me. I don't think so at all anyway, because Monet had already begun experimenting with Impressionist work. But look at this picture by Turner. You can really see images later on. You can see images later on where you can see Monet's influence very, very strongly by Turner. Very, very modern artists, and they're both going to focus on the same thing, which is the sort of transient effects of light and weather, different weather conditions, experimenting with color theory. So he's going to use color theory by Delacroix, he's going to use painting techniques by Turner, he's going to combine them all. But Monet is a pure genius. We can say that Monet did dramatically change after he went back to Paris, after he had been studying in London. And if ever you get a chance to check out his London paintings, they're pretty spectacular. Finally, I'm going to look at something else, something very, very different from this. So if we could go to our next work of art. Now, this was very, very important. This was very, very important. That's a good question there, which was, I always wondered why Turner was beloved, but the Impressionists weren't in their time. That's a really good question. The fact is that Turner was very heavily criticized too. And in fact, a lot of the works that we now look at as experimental works, they weren't the works he was doing for the general public. If you see his works at the time, many of them were very ordinary standard portraits, but he was experimenting a lot. So that's why those works weren't accepted by the general public in the UK either. But I want to look at Japanese art. Does anyone know, I'm going to ask a different question this time, if anyone's seen my video on the Great Wave, does anyone know the name of this type of Japanese work? Anyone know the name of the type of this Japanese work? These were incredibly popular with European artists. Hokusai, very well, good. Elaine, excellent. Forever Sapphire, you got it right. Really, I'm really impressed. I'm very, very impressed, because I forget the name of that sometimes. It's ukiyo-e, which is kind of like the floating world. That's the name of these prints. These prints, by around the 1850s, had really just made their way into the West. Japan had been closed off for a long, long time, and these paintings were coming in a long, convoluted way, but they did manage to make their way in. And Claude Monet, for example, had a huge collection of these prints, of these woodblock prints. And if anyone's been to Giverny, to his house in France, to Giverny, then you'll know that he had a huge collection of these, a massive collection of Japanese prints. These were very, very important. They showed Impressionist painters they could portray scenes from everyday life. You can go in close here as well. Look at you can see their blocks of color as well, because they're wooden prints, but that affected how artists painted as well. So these introduced to European art the concept of flat planes of color, asymmetrical composition as well. So that was very different, how art was focused as well. The man who's going to be most influenced by this is Van Gogh, who isn't an Impressionist, he's a post-Impressionist, but that's kind of not the point. So he's going to be influenced. Now we're going to jump forward a little bit, and we're going to go to the next painting. I'm going to let you guess at this one. Anyone know, this is the close-up, anyone know who did this painting? Or even better, you win a prize if you get the right, actually there's no prize, sorry, if you get the right title. So if you want to get the right title, ooh, where's that? Oh, someone got it, but I missed them. They've gone up, they've gone too high. Somebody needs to give themselves a badge, because it's Impression Soleil Levant. Impression soleil levant, which means an impression of the rising sun. You guys are very good. I'm super impressed. Monet showed this painting at that very important exhibition of 1874. I'd like to talk about that for a bit because it's going to be one of the most important exhibitions ever staged. Let's just pull back and look at the whole painting here as well. If anyone's seen this in Paris, you know it's just spectacular. It looks so loose. Just imagine these people in France going to see an exhibition of work like this. It must have been so shocking and unbelievable. It's hard for us to understand about the show itself, not just the work, but the show, because it was very revolutionary for artists to put on their own show. Let's say any of you guys live in a small town. Actually, if you don't mind putting some comments in the comments, let's say, for example, where you live, take a rough guess at how many galleries there are in your area. So I'm at the moment in Suffolk, and I know in Ipswich, which is the nearest big town, there are roughly 3 or 4 galleries. I also live in London as well. I live in both. And in London, there are hundreds and hundreds, like a lot of galleries. So, so you guys have got 3 to 4, Texas, 5 incredibly big galleries. Everything's big in Texas, Liesel, so that's fine. So, Las Vegas, how many galleries are there in Las Vegas? Lots and lots of galleries in some of these big cities, but in Paris, in this period of time, there was just one place to show your work, and we've already spoken about it, and that's the Paris Salon, run by the Academy, which, by the way, is run by the state, run by the French state. So any artist had to do exactly what they were told. They had to stick by the rules if they wanted to sell their work. But the Impressionists are going to break all the rules, not just with their art, but putting on their own show. So they put on their own show, and that is in 1874. Very, very important time in history, and things are going to change from now on. So was it a success? Do you think it was a success? No, it wasn't a success at all. So it wasn't a success at all. We're so familiar with these works of art, we sometimes forget just how unpopular they were when they first came out. The 1874 show caused a scandal, but it totally placed them on the map. As you know, no publicity is bad publicity, and that's when Louis Leroy, a art critic who we would have forgotten apart from the fact that he named this movement, he makes fun of the style of painting they were doing. And in his review, he said that Monet was insubstantial. He was unsubstantial rather, and his work was just an impression. So he takes the title of Monet's painting and turns it against him. Monet was too clever for him. He was a great self-publicist, one of the best self-publicists, and he cleverly decided to take the title and reclaim it. So the sarcastic critic who hated the Impressionists had no idea that the name he gave them would still be talking about it a century later. Now we're going to jump to the next picture. Got a few more to go. I just want to show you the kind of thing they're painting. They're painting modern technology. And anyone want to... I think you probably know who this is by, right? You saw this as who this painting is by. It's by Claude Monet. And it's painted in a train station. Now, what's really, really interesting is, first of all, no one would have painted a train in these days. These classical French painters, they would have looked down on this kind of thing, painting modern technology. It would be like us today painting a laptop and putting it on show. It was modern technology. Not only that, but Monet painted it in the train station. So he painted it in the train station, and he did it by paying the station master a small amount to stop the trains in their tracks so he could paint them. He promised him later on he'd give him a painting for doing it, but he never delivered it. So that poor station master never got a Monet painting that years later would have sold for 40-50 million. And this this picture really was too much for the critics. It was really too much. They were pushing it too far. Yep, you're right, Elaine. It's Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris, one of the most beautiful train stations in the world. And a painting of a filthy train station was too much for the critics. So they just had enough of the Impressionists by now. But the Impressionists were embracing modernity, and they painted things of the here and now, like we see now when we go to galleries. Often, when it's the countryside, though, they would have painted with different colours. So we're going to go to our next picture now, which is one of the most beautiful paintings. And here again we have Claude Monet. So we have Claude Monet. Huge difference here. Can we go in nice and close here to see how different the brushstrokes? And remember, the critics are looking at this and being disgusted by how modern it was. But they're starting to like them. They're starting to like the Impressionists, and particularly Monet as well. The thing about Monet, which is really interesting for me, is that Monet was a very gregarious character. Everyone loved him, and everyone loved this man. And he was a great promoter for the Impressionists, whereas Cézanne, he was quite grumpy and miserable and didn't really like talking to people. But Monet was out there all the time trying to sell his work. Monet became very rich, very, very rich indeed. In fact, there's a great photo online, if you want to look it up, of Monet with his chauffeur and his Rolls Royce, a very early Rolls Royce. Driving around Giverny at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. So he was a kind of a real, really making a lot of money at a late stage in his life. So look at the colours there. No black. Again, no black. He's avoiding the dark colours. Just pull back on the painting just for a little bit, for 1 second, just so we can see the whole painting. What I want you to think about is when you go into somewhere like the Louvre, or somewhere like the National Gallery, the National Gallery of Washington, and you're walking through all those paintings from the 1700s and 1800s, very dark, earthy colours. Suddenly, the Renaissance colours are very, very dark and earthy, not bright colours. And now if we go in close, you can see the colours he's using here. They were really unconcerned with smooth surfaces, and the Academy loved those smooth surfaces, and they're more inclined to show the brushstrokes and use different colours. And now, folks, the colours of those trees, if you go back to the colours of those trees, if you go back onto Google Arts and Culture after this is finished, and you compare that with Gainsborough or Constable, you'll see it's exactly the same concept. They were starting to use new colours to create colours in your eyes. Now pull back as quickly as you can, and you'll see your eye is doing all the work. That is what the Impressionists understood, all about the colour theory as well. Now we're going to jump to another painting. My favourite artist. I love this artist. Anyone want to take a guess who this is? It's the easiest one of the whole talk. This was featured, sorry, not this particular painting, but this artist was featured in that 1874 show. Yep, you're all getting it exactly right. God bless you. It's great. Yeah, I love Cézanne. I absolutely love Cézanne. And as I said to you, they were painted. They were known for painting them many times. Mont Saint-Victoire, as I told you, over 60 times he painted it. He's going to break away from the Impressionists. So Cézanne and Monet were kind of friends. I don't know how to explain their relationship. I never have, because you can never explain Cézanne's relationship, even with Hortense, his wife. Who knows what Cézanne was thinking most of the time. A very, very difficult man, but a brilliant artist. And he's going to break away from the Impressionists, and his work is going to inspire the next generation of artists. So he moved, as I said, to Aix-en-Provence, and he painted this from so many different angles, so many different times a day, different weather condition, and over 60 times. So you can see how his style has moved on from the earlier painting I showed you by him. Now, let's go to the next painting. Let's go to the next one. Anyone know who this is? I think I've spoken about it many times. I'm going to ask you a question which I've already given you the answer to. So how many times did Monet paint this cathedral, which you guys all know. This is Rouen Cathedral, Rouen. And the cathedral is an amazing piece of architecture. This is famous for where Jeanne d'Arc is going to be burnt outside. But it wasn't the cathedral he was interested in. It wasn't Jeanne d'Arc he was interested in. It wasn't any of that at all. He was interested in the light, the passage of time, how time passed as well. And how the shadows changed and how the lighting. Yep, it's a lot, as you just said. You all got it right, so you're obviously listening. It was 30 times. In fact, if I'm going to be honest, it was 31 times he painted it. Let's jump to the next one now, please. And we're going to look at the next painting here. If you go online and you see those images, by the way, of Rouen Cathedral and all the different times he painted it, you'll see the colours really change at different times of the day. So let's go to the next painting, which is a much later painting by Monet. He's going to be painting this later. Now, if you haven't seen my video, my film on my channel about these paintings, this is from the Orangerie in Paris. And he painted this much later in his life. And he painted tens, 40, 50 water lilies, but these are the huge, large ones here. And I think the reason I'm showing Monet so much is we need to think of him as the driving force behind the Impressionists. As I said to you, he became hugely successful, very rich. And he lived and worked until his 80s. And the last years of his life were spent painting these water lilies, these big, huge water lilies for the Orangerie. I really do love these paintings, so please check out my film. It's one of my favorite topics is the story of Monet painting these. Now in his 80s he spends them, and these are gonna go on display in the Orangerie, but he struggled to finish them. Did he struggle to finish them? Not really. He just wouldn't finish them because he wanted to. Painting was keeping him alive. You know, there's not many people lived until their 80s in this period of time, and he struggled to get them finished for the opening, and he died a few months before the exhibition opened, unfortunately. Now, not so unfortunately, really. Maybe it was good that he died at that period of time after working so long on these paintings, because it wasn't that people hated them. It wasn't people hated them. They just didn't care. Nobody cared about these paintings anymore. It was just too boring from them. The Impressionists were considered boring, and critics who finally came round to Impressionists were now getting bored with them as well. And they had moved on to different types of work. And let's go to the next picture, please. We're going to come back to Monet here. What if anyone want to guess at the artist here? Anybody want to guess at the style of art here? Yeah, good comment there. He was going blind, so he wasn't. It was actually he had cataracts. That was the problem. He had cataracts, and one of them, he only had operation in one eye. He was too scared to have the operation in the second eye, so the cataracts meant that he picked the wrong color. So let's pull back on this picture now and show everyone the picture, and it is of course the Cubist movement. It is Pablo Picasso, but it's not by Pablo Picasso, it's by Juan Gris. And but yeah, excellent guesses. So this is Cubism, and the critics have moved on to this. These were the beloved the darlings of the critics, whereas the Impressionists had struggled all that time. In fact, all of the Impressionists were now starting to be considered a bit old, a bit forgotten, but thankfully for us, they're going to be rediscovered by a whole new generation, about 20 years after Monet died. So this is Cubism. Now I want to go back to the other image again, please. Now I want to go really close as you possibly can. So this is Monet here. This is the water lilies. Maybe as close as we possibly can, and let's scan around the picture to show people what the picture's like. You can see there, you can see the canvas underneath. You can see, were they finished or were they unfinished? Who knows what they were. I want to ask you, if we go in nice and close, that's great actually, look at that. Just stop there for a little second. Look at those brush strokes. I'm going to ask you, what artist, I know some of you followed me on Instagram, so you know that I've been posting about this as well. Which great American artist was very much influenced by these particular paintings by Monet? So these are very abstract paintings up close. Which famous American artist do you think was most inspired by him? The next generation we're talking about. So this was painted about a year or so before he died. And as you were saying earlier on, he had cataracts. It really is completely avant-garde. So I want to just, before I say who that artist was, one of you has got it. So, but in fact, everyone you've mentioned, pretty much everyone you mentioned, was inspired by this artist, by this particular series of work. Now, lots of American artists came to Paris in the 1950s on what is called the GI Bill, and many of them just went crazy when they saw these water lily paintings, and they'd be going into the orangery to see these paintings, and the only people in there were young American artists, because French people just didn't give a damn about them. They just thought they were quite ugly, actually. So these famous paintings, now famous paintings by Monet, were a little bit forgotten by everyone except for the Americans. And they went over to America in 1955. So 1955, the one artist I'm really thinking of at the moment was not in Paris at this particular time, but he was in New York in 1955. And he just loved this painting. He absolutely loved this painting. Let's go to the next picture. Yep. So Pollock, Jackson Pollock. Well done. Some of you have got it. Jackson Pollock and the abstract impressionists. Some of you said Rothko. Rothko just loved Monet as well. But Pollock in particular was very much influenced by those late water lily paintings. And this is a period when the art world is completely switched from Paris to New York. If you've seen my Great Art Cities Explained about Paris, you'll see we're leading up to going over to New York next. And this is the abstract expressionist movement. Many women involved in that movement as well, which we'll be looking at. So Pollock absolutely loved Monet as well. So let's go back to our next picture. Anyone want to hazard a guess at who that's by? If anyone gets this, I will call out their name. Anyone want to take a guess who this painting is by? The reason I want to show you a close-up is look at that painting. It's like, it's almost abstract expressionist, but it's before this as well. So it's way before the abstract expressionists. And this is one of the impressionists, impressionists. This painting is one of the most famous paintings in the world, but we just sometimes forget how new that was. Look at the, if you look at where just to the left of the red there, you can see that's canvas, that's raw canvas. Look at the flecks of blue there, that's all raw canvas. And this is quite revolutionary painting. All right, I don't think any of you are going to get this, because I would never have got this in a million years until I started going on the Zoom. Oh, okay, let's pull back now. Let's pull back now. David Mechabel. David Mechabel. Well done. So we're going to look at this painting here. And look how beautiful that is when it all comes together. So this is what all of these artists are studying. They're studying color theory. They're studying how our eyes really fill in the picture for us. So our eyes are working to help the painters. And they understood that. They understood the science behind it as well. So this is what I really wanted to talk to you about. To see how artists that we consider so acceptable and mainstream today, even what I call chocolate box artists, which is when you get a nice chocolate box, it's got a painting on the cover. In fact, they were real art revolutionaries. And we can see from this how Delacroix, how Constable and Turner and cheap Japanese prints, how those things and the invention of the camera can lead to Monet and Cézanne and Renoir, and pictured here, of course, and they in turn are going to lead to Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, and they're going to lead to someone like Yayoi Kusama and Tracy Emin, and so on and so on. So what I think is really interesting is never just dismiss a work of art. You can say you don't like it or whatever, but that came from another work of art. So it's kind of interesting for us to follow that. So I think we're going to end there pretty shortly. What I want to say to you before we go is don't forget to subscribe to Google Arts and Culture. Anyone got any last minute questions? Yes, David, I can't believe you won either. I'm super impressed. I don't know how anyone could have possibly got that. And don't forget to subscribe to Google Arts and Culture. Click below, down below, and then go over to my channel and subscribe to my channel. And my new video comes out tomorrow, and I'm going to give you an exclusive and tell you what my video is. What's my favorite painting? Ooh, I'm going to do my own Zoom soon on my YouTube channel, and I'm going to answer all those questions. I don't have a favorite painting, but I have lots of them. So my new video comes out tomorrow on my channel, and here's an exclusive. The video tomorrow is Yayoi Kusama. So thank you very much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to Google Arts and Culture and me. So thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming to watch. Cheers.